G'day everyone, we are back. Just me today though for the Shady Casters as we're bringing out some new content. Get excited. Today I'm going to be taking you through my High Elf Chracian Woodsmen conversion. But first, just a little bit of background. The White Lion theme or Chracian theme High Elf army was something that I've always wanted to do from way back in 8th edition. And since Games Workshop brought out the Arcane Journal this year, that's really opened up the opportunity for some to be creative, but also really motivated me. On top of that, the Shadow Warrior kit, the plastic multi-part kit, was something that I always found really cool and something that I always wanted to work into my army in different ways. And during the brainstorming process of this project, which was way back in at the end of 8th edition, I actually stumbled upon this really cool Shadow Warrior and White Lion kit bash. It's a Blood Bowl army. Now, I don't know the hobbyist personally or beyond this Blood Bowl army, but just wanted to share it with you guys because credit where it's due. Now, of course, this kit bash, the Shadow Warrior and White Lion kit bash, did become very popular when the AJ or the Arcane Journal first dropped. And many High Elf players jumped on this, and I was one of them. Though my concept is a little bit different, and that's what I want to take you through today. Like most hobbyists, I want to say during this conversion process, don't be scared to try different things and become creative, but also have a lot of fun during the process. You'll see some of my pictures from my initial Chracian Woodsman. I'm definitely no pro, and I'm definitely not an artist when it comes to my conversion or putty work, but it's something that I've progressively gotten better with and more comfortable with, and if you have a lot of fun along the way, you'll really be happy with the end product. First, with these multi-part plastic kits, you want to plan out what parts you're going to be using. I'm a little bit particular with this process, and I write down what I've used with what parts I've used with what in the catalogue that's provided by Games Workshop. So you'll see lots of numbers and scribble in my booklets. Now I've created a few different variants of my Woodsman. The main one that I like the most is one with using the bow from the Shadow Warriors, but also with the converted hand weapon axe. The second one that I also like to make is the Great Blade, the Chracian Great Blade Wielders. And this is to fit the theme from the Arcane Journal of the unit fit out. I'm going to show you how to do both today. For all my Woodsmen, I do use the White Lion legs, mainly because they look a little bit more in motion, like the miniature is running rather than the stagnant sort of stance of the Shadow Warrior legs. I use the Shadow Warrior chest plate and cloak or cape because I think that's the greatest part about the Shadow Warrior models. It sort of has that Lord of the Rings sort of Gondor Ranger type feel. I use the White Lion head with the helmet just because I like it thematically. It sort of fits what I was going for a bit more, but you could definitely use the Shadow Warrior head and helmet if that's your preference. And the arrow quiver from the Shadow Warrior. So that goes on all my Woodsman models. For the Great Blade Wielder now, I'm going to have to use both arms. We're going to have to use both arms from the White Lion model with the axe. So that's just going to require a little bit of slicing, which we'll have a look at. For the hand weapon and bow, we still use the Shadow Warrior arms, but with a little bit of work just to swap out the Shadow Warrior sword for an axe. I really loved the hand weapon axe that Corhill's wielding. That was something that was a little bit of inspiration for me. I loved the idea that it was almost like he had a throwing axe as a second weapon. Now, thankfully, the easiest thing about conversion in today's hobby is 3D prints. And I found these awesome hand weapon axe prints created by Elfhead 3D, which is an Etsy store. Again, I don't know this hobbyist personally or anything, but It's something that I stumbled upon, and they have really great High Elf conversion parts on their shop, or in their shop. So I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check that out. We obviously want to give all the parts a good clean once we've figured out all the bits that we're going to be using for each model. Using our hobby knives and then a little bit of sandpaper. You particularly want to use a bit of sandpaper on the 3D printed axes, just to remove or smooth out any of the printing lines and supports. Once this is done, once we've cleaned the miniatures up, we're now going to swap out the hand weapon sword, the Shadow Warrior sword, with the axe. Now, in this video, on this particular miniature, I did try something a little bit different to my other ones, my other woodsmen, and I actually use the entire axe piece while also maintaining the Shadow Warrior sword handle. This is just something I wanted to try, which ends up making the axe a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, but not something in the end I was entirely happy with. But I'm glad I gave it a go. Just for reference, my other woodsman, I actually cut the axe handle to size for where the hand of the Shadow Warrior should sit on the axe. So it looks a little bit more natural and sort of it looks a little bit more natural based on the 3D print. Then I just clean cut the sword and the bottom part of the handle from the hand, and then I check the hand position with the axe to see roughly where I want it, and I just cut there. When gluing the axe to the hand, I don't use plastic glue, I just use super glue, because I may need to more easily remove the axe and reposition during this process. Don't worry too much about the strength of the super glue hold. You're just really using this to position the axe on the hand. And we're going to go back in and work in some putty onto the axe handle to create a much cleaner look and also make the hold strong so that the axe isn't breaking from the hand easily. I'll then simply start working in the modelling putty. I use Milliput super fine white because I just personally like working with it. I've got a lot of experience with it. But you could literally use just about any miniature putty that you want out there. This is just something I like working with. The only ones that may not work for this particular project would be, say, green stuff, because it's quite elastic and won't be easily worked in into the areas that we need. I also use AK silicone brush tools to work with the putty with a little bit of water. Again, just an item that I like to use, but you could use any sort of putty working tools. But I'll leave a link in the description for both of those items for anybody who's interested. As you can see in the video, I'll be working in, I'm just simply smoothing out some of the handle using the putty. It doesn't have to be super smooth or a super accurate look or feel with the axe handle when doing this part of the project, because we're going to go back in and sand once it's dry anyway. So once the Milliput's dry, we're going to go back in and sand it and smooth all of that out to make it look like one big axe handle. On to cutting the great blade. I start by cutting the shoulder pad from the arm on the white line torso. Once that's done, I then just clean cut the arm from the torso. A little bit of cleanup work is required here, just with the hobby knife and some sandpaper, but don't worry too much of the quality of the cleanup job, as we can simply go back over and cover these parts of the shoulder with line fur later on in the project anyway. The other arm, the left-hand arm of the axe wielder, of the axe wielding, will also need the shoulder pad attachment to be cut and cleaned. And the same, don't stress too much about how clean that looks in the end. Once we've done those two parts of the conversion, so we've done the hand weapon axe and we've cleaned up the great blade wielding arms, we can then put all of the parts together and stick them on the base to see how it's turned out, how both of the models have turned out with their weapons. I do use a combination of plastic glue or super glue. I use plastic glue in the areas where I think it can meld and join together well. But then, as you'll see, I then need to use some super glue for the great blade arms. I'm not sure why, but with this torso and arm combination, I have to leave some gaps between them when gluing. So just to get it all to fit in there, I've had to sort of leave some gaps between the arms and the torso. This hasn't happened with previous combinations of Shadow Warrior torso and the Great Blade arms, but for some reason, just this particular combination has caused this. But that doesn't matter because I'm just going to go back in and add some putty into those gaps and then cover it with line fur later on anyway. So as you can see in the video now, I'll just be adding a little bit of putty just in the gaps in those arms just to make it, again, a stronger hold and to just smooth out those areas. Now on to the fun part. And the reason you're probably watching this video, but adding the line fur or pelt to the top of the Shadow Warrior cloak or cape. Again, I use Milliput Superfine White, and I just start by essentially blobbing the putty onto the Shadow Warrior cloak in the areas that I want the fur to appear. And I'll just start bit by bit. Now, at any stage during this process, you can check where you want the quiver to sit on the back. This is so you don't waste any time creating too much line fur in that area or putting too much putty in that area. At this stage, you're really just now adding the putty to create a frame of the line fur. In other words, creating the thickness and shape of the line fur. So again, don't worry too much about how the putty looks in appearance. This part of the process can just be done bit by bit over the areas where you want the fur to appear. And you'll see me doing that in the video. As this process goes, as you continually adding putty to this process, the Milliput can be very easily worked together and combined with just a bit of water using the silicone brush. So as I said, this smoothing process will continually happen throughout the whole time that you're adding the Milliput until it comes together as a whole. Once you're happy with the shape and the thickness of the fur, we're then going to go in and create the fur effect. And there are two ways that we can achieve this. The most important technique is through painting the line fur, which is the only technique I used on my early Woodsman miniatures. And you can do the same. However, the second technique is something that I've improved as the project has progressed. And that is to indent some basic fur patterns into the putty. Here you can see that I'm doing that with some very simple triangle patterns as to create a bit of a fur effect. Something a little bit close to the Games Workshop white line cloaks. You don't need to get too carried away with detail in this part. It's just to create an extra layer of or a bit extra depth in the fur. Whereas realistically, the painting is the part that's going to create the most important fur effect. So this is just a nice detailed add-on and something that as you progress and get better, will continually look better. Here you can see the finished line for indents on the putty for both of my miniatures. And I'm also going to now add on the quivers. So I'll add the quivers and then we'll have a look at how that looks finished. You can see here it's a bit more close up on my hand weapon axe and bow wielder, or wielding model. Now, without turning this too much into a painting video, mainly because I was running out of time creating this video, I wanted to show you both the blue and the fur paint job from the Woodsman cloak, just to give you that final effect, particularly with the fur. First, I went for a darker teal colour. This is the teal is the normal colour for my army, and I've gone for a darker version of this, based off, again, the Arcane Journal unit description. I start with Stegodon green mixed with a little bit of black just to have that really dark base coat. Then using Stegodon green as sort of a secondary base coat with a little bit of highlight in there. I then step up to a 50-50 mix of Stegodon green and Sotek green, where I work my way all the way up to just Sotek green with a little bit of contrast medium is what I use, just to thin the paint a little bit for the final highlight. As you may see in some of the photos at the end of the video with my Woodsman, I have changed the colour of my fur cloaks a little bit, but I've now my new colour scheme. I start with a base of Xandri dust, and now I'm going to have a look at doing a highlight with the Ushabti bone. Now, the importance of the highlight here when painting the fur is that you're trying to create the fur texture. So again, I now go in and create the triangle or fur-like shapes, somewhat following the indents that I've made on the putty, which again can be really helpful. You don't have to necessarily follow that shape with some of my earlier models, again, or earlier paint jobs. I simply just did a little bit of straight line fur or sort of wavy line fur to keep it really simple whilst I was learning how to do the fur effect. And again, you can do the same if you want to keep it really simple, but it will still look good. This is as far as I got with painting in this video. If I was to take it, mainly again, sorry, because I've ran out of time, but if I was to take this further for the paint job, and as I have done with my other miniatures, I would use a really, really watered down wash on the fur like Serpian Sepia. That just gives the fur a little bit more depth that it's not going to get from the fact that it doesn't have the actual fur mold like on a Games Workshop miniature. Then you want to go back and highlight with Ushabti bone, and then probably follow by another highlight in the areas that are going to be hit by a lot more light with a 50-50 Ushabti and white. Stick around right till the end of this video. I'm just about to show you some of my completed Chracian Woodsmen that I finished earlier in the year, right back when I started this project. I really hope this conversion tutorial has been somewhat helpful, if not at least inspiring to you. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that if you want to see more content like this from Aaron and I. We can literally do anything to do with painting our armies or any other conversion work we've done. We really enjoy this side of the hobby. And please, as always, please subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way to supporting us and helping us out. Otherwise, here's my completed Chracian Woodsman, and thank you again for watching.